the one guy who demoed the $15,000 system in the bathroom,
Yeah.
dual subwoofers under
Yeah.
the sink, and I just thought, oh
pretty
my
wild.
gosh, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nobody needs that. So I'm being judgmental, and I'll admit that I judge sometimes. It's like, oh, I would never spend that kind of money on this type of thing.
It's okay to have stuff, but just make sure the stuff doesn't have you. So I believe that God placed even this desire and my love for home theater and movies and music. I think it's there for a reason. I don't think anything's by accident. My joy and my happiness does not come from this. My joy comes from... Hey, what is going on, guys? Today in this video, this is going to be totally different than probably any other video I've ever shared on this channel. It's super personal. It's something near and dear to my heart. And we're talking about faith as it relates to business and this whole YouTube thing. And so Randy had some things in his brain that were just really kind of conflicting with the Christian faith and having a nice home theater. And so I thought it was just going to be a cool conversation. He asked some very candid questions and I just shared my heart. But I also wanted to mention, as I'm editing this video right now, there are parts of the video where I had eye tracking on, but because I was turned to look at him, the camera couldn't find my eye, and so the camera goes out of focus. But instead of just chopping those parts out, I'm leaving them in because I really believe in the conversation that we had. I just think it was really, really cool, really in depth. It gives you some more insight just to who I am as a person, not just a content creator. So bear with us during those parts, but hope you enjoy the video. Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're in my theater room. I've met my new friend, Randy. Randy's down here on business, and you're from Vancouver, Washington?
Yep.
Super cool. And he wanted to hear my theater, but he also had an interesting request. He said, Michael, I would love to interview you. And I haven't done that very often, and so I'm curious about this. And he sent me just a handful of questions that he was wanting to ask, and really it's about faith. You and I share the same faith, and but he has some specific questions about faith and business and how does that align and this whole home theater. And so I'm excited to have you here. And first, it's your first time here in my home theater. What was that experience like?
It was amazing. I was thoroughly impressed. It really is like being in a commercial movie theater, just with the power of the speakers and the Atmos and all that stuff. It was a blast. So thoroughly impressed. The laser projector, I mean, it looks as good as any theater I've been in. It was amazing. So yeah, you have done a phenomenal job putting this together and putting together just such an enjoyable experience.
Well, I appreciate that. I know you had mentioned, Michael, isn't this a bit much? Like, is this overkill? And I said, well, you be the judge. So was that overkill? Did I blow you out of the room?
No, it was amazing. And clearly, I have a 5.1 very modest system, Paradigm speakers that I got way back in 2000. Just had a Yamaha receiver for years, just upgraded to a Denon that a friend gave me. But yeah, clearly I could absolutely not reproduce what I experienced here with my system. So yeah, for a room this size, you definitely need something more powerful.
Okay. Well, cool,
yeah,
man.
It was really fun.
Welcome to my home. I know you got a list of questions. We're just going to have a cool conversation, and we want to invite you into that conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, man. This is your interview.
Wonderful. Well, just a little background on me. So I've always been a fan of home theaters. Back in the day with Audiovisual Interiors magazine, I think I subscribed to that for a while and just would drool over the systems in there, some of the ones with like the starlight ceilings and the red curtains on the wall and all that. And it was just always beautiful, but it's like, I'll never afford that. So I related to when you said, oh, that's for rich people.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't think I could ever get something like that. And I still don't. But, it's been fun to get in your theater here where, no, you're not rich, but you've managed to put together something that's amazing. Like you, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, what some people will call a Christian, but that's such a loaded term. I like that term better, that, I just try to follow Jesus, give my heart to him and do what he asks. And one thing he said is, if you love me, you will obey my commandments. And so, when I read the Bible and he has certain things in there, well, I try to take it seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
And so with that, like, for example, one of those commandments is in Matthew 6, where he says, don't lay up treasures on earth, but lay them up in heaven.
Yeah.
And so then I start to see this conflict. Well, gosh, could this become a treasure if I went all out and got some really cool system like this?
Yeah.
I'm just worried that would become a treasure for me, it becomes too important and so on. And so there's definitely this conflict inside about feeling like, oh, I couldn't do that. And then, and that even if I could afford it, even if I did start making lots of money, that I shouldn't do it, you know, because that
Almost
would be,
like guilt. Like,
yeah,
okay,
I'd be feel guilty, I'm violating that commandment and so on. Probably overthink it too much. Definitely guilty of that at
Sure,
times.
that's okay.
So then ran across your channel and just, you know, enjoying your reviews and so on, but then learned that you're a believer and that you're a follower of Jesus as well. And then discover as I watch your story, you're not just a nominal believer, you're a very serious believer. You were a youth pastor for 23 years. It's like, okay, I just started wondering, how do you reconcile having a system like this, which I think you estimated is worth around 100 grand of equipment or something
about
like
115 MSRP in this room. Now, I don't have that in this room, but that's MSRP is about 115.
that? Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And then, you know, the custom woodwork, all that stuff, and, you know, and it's impressive, it's amazing. But then just trying to reconcile serious believer, you two are trying to follow the commandments.
Yeah.
And it broke my brain a little bit, you know, just trying to reconcile those two. So I thought, wouldn't it be neat to just ask you some questions directly, you know, run some verses by you and just get your take on them to see if I can kind of come to a different perspective, you know, and obviously you've done that and you're comfortable with it and so on.
I'm an open book.
Part of what did that was with when you knew God was really calling you to go into this full time, you know, to really make a go of putting together a YouTube channel and views and make a living from that. And that's what really is like.
Seems weird, right?
Yeah, it's like, wow, okay, so God's calling him where he's not only buying these expensive toys, he's promoting it to others and so on. It's like, wow, how do you do that? So I just want to bring, you know, start by just bringing up some of those things, you know, and I have to say that I started to see a conflict in myself with, like, you know, like I've already been alluding to.
Yeah.
Where on the one hand I go, wow, I want this. This is just amazing. Now, Michael, when are you going to repent and get rid of this? You know, and so it's like, okay, I'm simultaneously coveting your system and condemning you for having it. And, you know, just recognizing that, wow, okay, so I'm being judgmental. And I'll admit that. I judge sometimes. It's like, oh, I would never spend that kind of money on this type of thing. In reading some of the comments, I see some similar comments from others, like, oh, what a waste of money, that's obscene, and so on. So I know I'm not the only one who struggles with this. So I figured some of your listeners could benefit from this as well. Some of us Pharisee types, for those of you who don't know, the Pharisees were a very strict religious sect back in Jesus' day, where, you know, they were just super legalistic, concerned about every little rule, and yet they were violating.
Yeah, their heart wasn't where it needed
to
be.
You know, and Jesus blasted them for it. You know, he got
100%.
on them that, you know, you're guilty of straining out a little tiny gnat, but you swallow a camel. You know, that's how bad it was for them. So I'm a recovering Pharisee, you know, trying to get past that, trying to be less judgmental about things like this and be more comfortable with it. So the first one, so specifically, I'll you know, read the actual passage. This is from Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Yeah, for sure. So to me, when I look at that passage of Scripture, never once I think is Jesus is saying that you can't have nice things. You can't have an expensive thing. You go back and look at a lot of the Old Testament prophets, a lot of the Old Testament kings. Look at King David. Was David poor?
Oh no, he was wealthy. A lot of the Old Testament guys were rich.
Yeah, they had massive amounts of cattle and land and possessions, but yet God said that David was what? A man after my own heart. And so again, I think that shows a key to what that passage is talking about. It's not the stuff, it's the motive why you have the stuff. And Dave Ramsey, I love following him. He's helped us to get out of debt, and he's a Christian as well. And one of the comments that he's made over the years, it's okay to have stuff, but just make sure the stuff doesn't have you. And so there's a difference. And so, you know, the Apostle Paul even talked about he knows what it's like to have a lot, and he knows what it's like to have nothing.
Yeah, we'll get
and he's
to
like,
that
he's
one.
like, I'm content either way. And Jessica and I have both shared with people in our life over the years that, you know what, we've lived in a mobile home, we've lived in a small house, we've lived in a bigger house. That stuff doesn't matter. At the end of the day, my life, my joy and my happiness does not come from this. Now, I get joy by playing with speakers and sharing comments and answering you guys and having interactions and those friendships that are established as a result of this channel. But that's not truly where my joy comes from. My joy comes from my relationship with Jesus, period. And so I think it really comes down to a heart issue. Where's your heart?
Yeah.
And that's why he says, like, where it's not so much whatever you buy, that's what your heart is. But he's saying, like, where is your heart with those things? The reality, this stuff could go away tomorrow. My business could close tomorrow. The economy could tank tomorrow. The housing market could collapse. A hurricane. We live in a hurricane state.
Right.
You know,
right.
a hurricane could come through here in August and wipe out my entire house. My existence isn't my home. You know, this theater room, these speakers, these subwoofers, the amplifiers, that's not who I am. You know?
Your identity is not wrapped up in that.
Absolutely. So my identity is not my theater room. I just happen to have a cool home theater. And again, this has taken me 25 years to get to this point.
Right.
A lot of people watch
you didn't have 115 grand to just plop down and buy that all at once.
Not at all. And as a content creator, full transparency, as a content creator, most of the stuff that we review, we can buy at a very significant price reduction because most of these brands don't want to have to ship it back. They're hoping we do buy it so that we do keep it, so that we do continue to show and talk about those products in the videos. And that's just additional advertising for them.
Yep.
So there's a savings there. And that's why I say I didn't pay $115 for this, but it's definitely not inexpensive.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is that challenge. Like, you know, can you go overboard with anything? Sure.
Sure. And
You
it's,
know?
yeah, it's maintaining that tension, you know,
Yeah.
between it owning you
Yeah.
and you owning it and just walking that line. So and that's something I've looked at sometimes is sometimes I won't get like the very top of the line item of whatever
Yeah.
line TV or whatever because I worry, well, that might be too important if I get that. So I'm going to get one where it's decent, it's good, but I don't just flip out over it.
Yeah, if you go back to the story where the rich man and Jesus is talking and he basically challenges the guy to sell everything and give to the poor. What did the dude do?
Yeah, and he walked
He walked away. He didn't have Jesus' message because that stuff had him.
It had him. It was too important to
It
him.
wasn't the fact that he was wealthy.
Yep.
It was the fact that Jesus knew his heart and he knew that that stuff was more important than his relationship with God. And so I think that's what it comes down to is where's your heart in this?
Yeah.
You know?
And that, you know, that's one of those passages I've looked at in that I do not think Jesus calls all of us to sell everything
No,
and give
no,
it to
for
the
sure.
poor.
Yeah.
But in his
And some
his
people he
case,
does, yeah.
Some people he does. In his case, Jesus knew that was more important to you.
correct.
Are you going to be willing to give it up? And he wasn't, you know, and that's why he said how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven because so often it is too important. It is their identity.
Yeah. I look at everything in my life, and I shared this with you. Everything in my life is a gift from the Lord. My children, my family, my occupation to be able to do this for a living, the opportunities that I've had to travel literally around the world to see some really amazing home theaters and meet some really incredible people along the way. That's a gift, you know? And so I look at everything in my life. I don't want Jesus to just be, in my relationship with God, to be something I do on Sunday.
Yep.
This needs to be who I am. And that's why, you know, some people say, well, you shouldn't talk about your faith. Well, I'm sorry. That's who I am. This channel isn't a preaching channel.
Right.
I don't, you know, I'm not doing that.
That's not the focus.
But if somebody asks me, Michael, why are you so dang happy? Well, guess what? I'm going to share why I'm happy. It's not because of my subwoofers are big, you know. And so
Well, it's maybe a little.
Yeah, I get some happiness out of that. But my joy comes much deeper than that.
Yes. And this is definitely one of the, you know, the challenging ones for me related directly to this. This is 1 John 2:15 through 16 or 17. Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that's in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away and also its lusts, but the one who does the will of God abides forever.
Yeah. So again, the things of this world, it doesn't say it's not okay to have things of this world.
You just can't love them.
The Apostle Paul said he had to be in the world, but not of the world. You know, we live in this world, and it's kind of interesting, and this may come in later on, but I had a gentleman, I was talking to him on the phone one time, and he was just going through a really deep, dark time in his life. And I got on the phone with him, and this is a guy from my Facebook group. I don't know him personally, but he said, Michael, I'm just going through a difficult time. And I just felt led, how about I jump on a call with you? And I can't do that with 150,000 people, but I really felt I should. So I got on a call with him, and through the conversation, he shared why he was hurting, and he was a believer, but he was just really discouraged, going through a dark time. And he said, Michael, I've been watching your channel, and one thing I don't understand, or he says, first thing he said is, you're the only believer that I know in this space. Now, I don't know if he meant like content creators. I don't know if he meant people that he knew that just were into home theater. I don't know. Yeah. But he said, you're the only believer, you're the only Christian in this space. And then about 10 minutes later, he says, you know, one thing I can't wrap my head around is why in the world would God take you out of the church and put you into like YouTube? And I just got a big old grin. I'm like, well, hold it, let's stop. Let's back up to what you said. You don't know anybody that's a believer in this space. So you tell me why God would take me out of the church and put me in this space.
Plenty of pastors out there and so on.
You know, so I think the reality is that I want to make an impact on this world. I want to encourage people. I want to be there for people. I've had numerous opportunities where I have met people online, become friends with them, and I find out that they're having a major life issue. Some of them have had cancer. And I get a chance, I just take the opportunity and I say, man, can I call you tonight and pray with you before you go into surgery? And most of the time they're like, man, I would love that because right now I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
You know, I had another gentleman, he had not an illness, but basically a virus or something that infected his ear, and then he couldn't hear.
Oh, wow.
Majority of his hearing was gone.
Ooh.
And then he's facing a major decision of, you know, do I do a cochlear implant? And I had the opportunity, same thing. I said, man, can I just call you and pray with you, man? I'd love to just be an encouragement to you. And he said, absolutely. And so those opportunities I love doing. So I still get to be a pastor to some along the way, and an encouragement to some that are hurting. And you know, when you read my comments, you won't see me lash out at somebody. You won't see me saying, oh, you're an idiot, you're stupid. Right. You know, it's
you're generally very gracious in your response to people who are frankly jerks.
Yeah. And again, that's my faith coming out. That's my faith being lived out in action. Because it's one thing to say I love Jesus. It's another thing to be like Jesus.
Are we walking it?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, the next one is from Exodus 20:17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male slave, or his female slave, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And I know it seems like a lot of marketing these days is designed to make us covet, to make us really want that thing, just make it look so appealing. And, you know, I know this isn't your motive in doing the reviews, but the reviews, you know, the reviews of these $1 million systems, like, oh my gosh, I wish I had that, you know, and we end up coveting it, you know. So I know for you know, you're wanting to not make people covet, but rather just show the journey, inspire people to put something that works for them and so on. But how do you work that with some of this just amazing gear and projectors and all that stuff, so it doesn't become a thing where we're just coveting it and basically wanting it more than we want God? Yeah,
so with number one, we have to realize not everybody has a relationship with God. Not everybody wants a relationship with God.
Right.
And that's their decision.
Yeah.
So for the Christian, for the believer, it's like, you know, I've always shared on my channel, I encourage you, I don't care what size room you have, I don't care what limitations you have, do something in your space. If this is what you truly love, don't let a room dimension keep you from building a cool home theater. If you don't have a dedicated theater room, very few of you guys have a dedicated theater room. Most people have a living room.
Yeah, you're like, yeah.
Don't let
that's
that
us.
stop you. If you just have a bedroom, I've seen theaters in all shapes, all sizes, all different levels. And you know what I choose to? I choose to celebrate them all. I don't care if you got a $500 system, man. Rock it out. If you only got the budget for 2 bookshelf speakers and no subwoofer, that's still way better than your TV speakers.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's really what I do, is I just choose to celebrate it all. Now, I do really budget-friendly home theater tours. I've done some that are really, really, we're talking like a $400 projector kind of thing. That's super budget-friendly in the world of this hobby.
Right. Right.
But I've also filmed and recorded and shared the journey of people that have a multi-million-dollar theater. Now, I don't have that. I don't covet that. I just celebrate it. I think it's awesome. I think it's cool. And that's part of their journey. And I just want to capture their story of why they chose the particular components that they did, how they came about it, what their passion and their heartbeat is for movies or music. And but that's really what I've done just on my channel, is just try to share that journey. But it's up to the individual to figure out, what works best for them. Of course, I don't want anybody overextending themselves. And that can be done with
Going
a
into
car, that can be
debt.
done with a house, that can be done with anything in life, a boat. You got to figure out, but I can't babysit you and tell you,
Right.
hey, you're spending too much. The way I look at it, you're a big boy. You work hard.
Yep.
You can spend your money how you want to. I don't expect you to tell me how to spend my money. If I want nice theater seats, or if I want a projector, or if I want a nice car, or if I want a nice home, whatever. By the way, I don't drive a nice car. I drive a 2013 Ford Explorer with 200,000 miles.
Nice.
And I choose that. I could have a new car.
Yeah.
But I choose that because that allows me to free up income to do other things, whether it's building a theater room, blessing others, being able to tithe, those types of things as a believer that I find very important.
Yeah. No monthly payment is a very good thing. We've got my wife's car paid off, still working on mine. We're going to try and pay off my my vehicle early.
Yeah, we're paying off our home early, so we've been doing that for many, many years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. This next one comes from Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. I won't read the whole passage, but it's basically talking about Lucifer, okay, also known as Satan, and how he used to be just the most beautiful of God's creation, just the top level angel, if you will, just beautiful beyond belief. But he started to get pride in his heart, and at a certain point it said, but you said in your heart, that is, Satan said in his heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne over the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. So basically, he wanted to be God.
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
wanted the worship.
Yeah.
And I heard just a fantastic couple of sermons by a guy named Greg Boyd. One of them was called The Horse of Perpetual Ascent. And this was from a passage in Revelation, but he tied it to this, where the idea is that, like the whole coveting thing, so much of today's culture is about bigger, better, faster, louder, more expensive. I mean, our whole economy is driven on this I will ascend mindset. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be, and keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And, for instance, it was so funny. A few years ago, I remember you reviewed this one theater that had the JTR speakers and the subs, and it might have been the first one. It had the moving seats and the
that
fans.
was Tony's,
Yeah, and it was so funny when you said, well, guys, the bottom line for me is, after seeing all this, my home theater sucks.
I do remember saying that.
And I just thought it was so, even you got that a little bit.
I was
It's like, oh man, because most people would kill to have your theater here. It's amazing. And yet, you're going, my home
But I
theater
didn't have
sucks.
JTR at that time.
Yeah.
That was the first experience of JTR, was Tony's. And it blew me away. And I'm like, I didn't realize there was that level of immersiveness. And he's just done a great job all around, even from his choice of demos to how he demos. He starts off with 2-channel, and then he starts adding a little bit here. So by the end, you have D-Box and wind, and you have, reference volume, and you've got the Croson actuator. So you got everything, but it doesn't start there. It starts, so just his presentation is truly, truly remarkable. But I'd never experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
And so that was powerful for me. And I was just like, My system's not like that at all, even though I had a great system.
Yeah, and you
but
do.
But it wasn't that level,
Right.
you know? But the reality is no matter what you have, there's always something
There's
bigger,
always
there's
something
always
better,
something
yeah.
better, there's always something faster. And so if you're always looking for the better, at some point you got to figure out, like, what am I content with? You know? And what I've challenged, and go back and watch all my previous videos, this has been a common thread through all of it. I've encouraged you, enjoy the journey. And so if you're at the soundbar stage, enjoy that journey. Enjoy that soundbar. There's nothing wrong with that. Be content with that. But what it doesn't mean is that you always, like, you're not allowed to want something bigger or better. You know what I'm saying?
And that, yeah, that's the struggle for me, I guess, is, be content with what you have and
Yeah.
so on. And yeah, where is that? I mean, for one, is when is enough enough? When is it good enough?
Yeah.
So
So
is it always going to be that you're always chasing the next thing? Like, what is it? How much is enough? Just a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I guess here's how you know if it's not enough. If you couldn't go, let's just say your house, the house that you live in now, if you could never own anything bigger or better or fancier, would you be okay with that? And if you can say yes to that, then you're content. Doesn't mean that you can't have a better home down the road. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't like a house with a pool. Like my wife wants a house with a pool one day. Hopefully I'll be able to get her one. That'd be cool. But if we don't ever get to that point, I'm still okay with that.
You're okay.
Because my identity isn't in my house. My identity isn't in the stuff that I have. The stuff doesn't have me.
Yeah.
I just enjoy some cool things.
Yeah. With that, as I've looked at some of the systems on that you've reviewed, and again, it's the Pharisee in me going, oh my gosh, give me a break. Like, for example, the one guy who demoed the $15,000 system in the bathroom,
Yeah.
dual subwoofers under
Yeah.
the sink, and I just thought, oh
pretty
my
wild.
gosh, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nobody needs that.
Yeah.
And I like for you, have you seen some systems that you reviewed and you same thing? It's like, oh my gosh, give me a break. That is
No.
so unneeded.
I've never thought that, and I guess there's a couple reasons. Number one, I do my best just to not judge somebody for how they spend their money. Again, they've built their business, they've worked hard, they've saved, whatever. I don't care how you spend your money. I'm not going to be the one that dictates that. But the other thing is you have to realize that it's all about perspective too. So for me to spend $200 might be way different than you spending $200. Like, to me, that may be like, oh my goodness, I got to save up a couple of paychecks and I got to put aside some money. I got to make sure we don't go out to eat this week. But for you, that might be like a $2 bill kind of thing. Like, oh, I got plenty of them. Just hand them out. You know what I'm saying? So a guy that's putting a $15,000 system in his bathroom, that could be like him dropping a $20 something. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It blows my mind. I've met some ultra wealthy guys, and for them to build even $1 million theater room is not that big of a deal for them financially. Now, I could never imagine that,
Right.
because I'm nowhere near that financially.
Right.
But the reality is it may not be hardly anything to them. Now, some of them are overextending themselves possibly, but again, I'm not judging that. I don't
Yeah.
care how you spend your money. And I don't expect anybody else to. Now, they will. They'll look at me and go, oh man, I can't believe you spent that on your projector. Or I can't believe you drive that vehicle, that piece of junk vehicle that I drive. But it gets me there, man.
it works.
But if I was driving a nice vehicle, somebody could say, oh, I can't believe you're driving a Range Rover. Well, I worked hard for it. I should be able to buy what I want. And so that's my choice. So I just take that same approach with other people. I don't judge them for what they spend their money on.
We all judge at times. I remember when Starbucks first came out, and all the people used to paying 5 cents or 10 cents for a cup of coffee. They said, I would never spend $5 on a cup of coffee. That is ridiculous. That's obscene.
And that was like $6.50.
Oh yeah, yeah. Or for someone else, maybe it's a crossbow, a $1,000 crossbow, or I don't know. They're probably more expensive.
Or a
than
bicycle. I mean,
that. $1,000 bike. Whatever.
You can spend as much or little as you want on any hobby.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're going to judge me on my home theater, well, what am I going to judge you on? What are you spending all your money on that you think, oh, well, what's wrong with that?
And again, I just see that as time wasted. for me. Like, I have no desire to get my brain worked up over your life. You know, I got enough problems of my own, man. I'm worried about me and making sure that my family's fed. My 2 girls are in college and that bill is getting paid, and my daughter that's getting married in December, that, you know, we can finance that. I ain't worried about your life. You spend your money how you want to. And
Yep.
that's just the approach that I've taken over the years.
Yep. Well, I know the antidote to this, in which you already mentioned the passage, but it's out of Philippians 4:11 about learning to be content with whatever you have. I've learned to be content with, you know, humble means and to live in abundance. You know, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then in 1 Timothy 6, particularly verse 8, and if we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. And so that's where I have struggled. It's like, well, okay, I've got food and clothing.
Yeah.
You know, why should I worry about getting the next fancy thing? I've got food and covering. So, you know, why would I look at upgrading if everything's working just fine?
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. But again, I just look at it as both sides. There's nothing wrong with you saying, my TV works great. It's 20 years old, but it's still got a picture, and I don't see lines, and it's okay. I don't need a 4K. But it's also for the guy that says, you know what, I'd like a bigger TV. I want to upgrade from a 55-inch to an 80-inch, or I want an OLED because I want those deep blacks. I want the beautiful picture. I just choose not to worry about what they spend their money on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one I still wrestle through at times. Because like my neighbor's TV is going on the fritz. The tint is blue. In fact, a friend of mine, his TV blew up, so they couldn't even use it at all. So yeah, I can see, obviously, time to get a new one.
Yeah.
But for mine, it's 40 inches, but it's
And there's nothing wrong with that.
nothing wrong with it. So I wrestle with, even though there's nothing wrong with it, upgrading to the next thing. Now, obviously, I need to keep my priorities straight, and we'll get to that a little later.
Yeah.
But that reminds me of a story that my guitar teacher, when I was taking guitar lessons, and I just had a really cheapy guitar. It worked, but it was okay. And so I started shopping for a nicer one, and I figured I'd spend maybe $1,000. That would get me a good quality guitar. Well, I found this Breedlove guitar, which they make these higher end guitars. At the time, they only made the higher end ones. Now they make some mid ones too. But anyway, it was $2,200.
Right.
And I just really struggled with spending that much money on a guitar. It just seemed like overkill.
Yeah.
I said, for my guitar teacher, he had a really nice one. I says, but you're a pro. You do this for a living. You should have a really nice one. That's your tool. But for me, I'm just using it to lead worship. And he says, you know what? I don't care if you're Phil Keaggy. Nobody can justify spending $2,200 on a guitar. He says, knowing why you use it and what you use it for, I say, just spend the money and be done with it. You'll feel guilty for a day or two, and then you'll get over it, and you'll be fine. You'll be glad you did. And he was right.
So even think about what you just said, though. So in a way, you're saying, God, you don't deserve to have a nice guitar, this cheap one that barely makes music. You know what I'm saying? So you can look at it both ways. So,
but for something like a hobby where I'm not really using it for ministry or whatever.
But you were saying you were leading worship with it, right?
No, I'm talking about home theater.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
For leading worship, yes, that's a very good point. He
Yeah.
deserves the best.
Yeah.
God deserves our absolute best. But yeah, for something like, it's just I'm watching movies on it. Well, and I'm not going to promise, I'll only watch Christian movies on it.
Yeah, right. I'm going to watch some John Wick,
Yeah, that's it. So, that's where I struggle more, where it's just more of a luxury type thing.
Yeah. Well, the reality, all right, let's even think about that and unpack that. This hobby is a luxury. Nobody needs a theater room.
That's true.
Nobody needs theater seats. Nobody needs a projector. Nobody needs a 150-inch screen. None of this
That's
stuff.
a good point.
None of this stuff is a need.
Because I look at it for you, it's like, well, you are making a living doing
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
you got to have some street cred and have some decent stuff.
Yeah,
but
this room is a result of my channel. This room is what drives the content, by talking about seats, by talking about projectors, by talking about screens and everything. So that is in essence, that is the business of this. The views that I get from YouTube pays me a little bit. The affiliate links, if somebody clicks on a link on some speakers that I review, and maybe they're being sold on Amazon. Well, Amazon gives me a whopping 3% of the sale, and so I get a little thank you for sending them over to Amazon or sending them to Audio Advice or Valencia or whoever. And so that's what pays my bills. And so investing in a nice theater room and nice camera, nice lighting, that's, like you said, that's my tools. And
Yeah.
this theater room technically is my tool.
Sure. So that makes sense. It's just, I struggle with it more when it's not my tool. It's
You got a
just
lot of
something
struggles,
fun.
I'm hearing.
Yes, yes, I do. A lot of conflicts
okay.
in the head.
That's okay.
Be glad you don't live in my head.
Yeah.
It's you know, I know with all of this, we mentioned a little earlier, but a lot of it has to do with the motive. Why am I getting it?
100%.
Is it because I want to brag? I want to boast that I
Right.
have the
Correct.
coolest system in
Correct.
town?
Correct.
Or is it just something that I just enjoy for my own personal use and for friends and so on? I think that definitely has something to do with it.
So here's an interesting thought that maybe you've never considered. I truly believe that God placed my love and passion and obsession for home theater. I believe He placed that inside me. And it seems weird, but I took a business course, I think either last year, maybe the year before, and they said business is an excuse to be in a relationship with others. And
like
here's
it.
what's kind of interesting about this whole journey. Because I have a theater room, because I'm passionate about this, I've never met you before today. But at any point during us hanging out, did you feel awkward?
No?
We share a common interest, not only our faith, but we also share a common interest in the hobby itself. And so as a result of this, I get a chance to talk to people literally around the world and have an immediate connection and immediate rapport, and we can hang out. I can go to Scott Newby's house and he can have 70 people in his home, and I've never met most of them. And I can go up and I can have a 15, 20-minute conversation with them, feel like we've hung out forever. So I believe that God placed even this desire and my love for home theater and movies and music, I think it's there for a reason. I don't think anything's by accident. And so for me to just say that, well, I started a channel because I wanted to get this fame and fortune or whatever, no, I truly believe that this was something that God was leading me to do. I left a full-time Christian ministry position as a youth pastor to pursue this. But I wouldn't have done that had I had felt that this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing.
Sure.
Now, there were many times initially, not now, but initially, I'm like, man, am I forsaking my calling?
Yeah.
Am I being disobedient? Should I be still a youth pastor?
Yeah.
And God just confirms time after time after time again how I get to love on people, how I get to encourage people, people that I would have never had the opportunity to do that with had it not have been for my channel. And so that's where I think it's one of those things that, I think it was Paul that said, whatever your hands find to do, do for the glory of the Lord. Whatever you're doing, if you're talking, if you're a construction worker, just glorify God in that. I think God was no more impressed with me being a pastor at a church than He is with me being a content creator on YouTube, or vice versa. Again, it's about the heart. It's about my individual relationship with Him. And as long as I'm being obedient to what He, leads me to do, then I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So there's definitely that concept of God use me wherever I am.
100%.
Whatever I happen to be doing, whether it's home theater, whether it's chopping trees,
Yeah.
washing dishes,
right.
pastoring a church, whatever. Yeah. No, that's good.
Put the people in front of me that you want me to love on and to encourage and to bless and to whatever.
Yeah.
Like when I gave my life to the Lord at the age of 15, I didn't tell Him where or how that looked like, I just said, I'm yours.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that I've seen a lot of comments about, and I don't know if you've ever addressed this in a video, is people who wish you would do more average guy home theaters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually have a dedicated video on that.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right, then.
The short version of that is if somebody reached out to me locally and said, hey, Michael, I live over here in Lakeland. Man, I'd love for you to film. Sure, it's easy to load up my gear, hop in my truck, go do that. If you live in Washington,
Yeah.
that's a different story.
Yep.
Spending 3 days away from my family, flights, hotels, food, travel, and that video, honestly, it's weird because the lower end one, like the real budget-friendly ones that just aren't real fancy. It's funny, you guys tell me, oh man, please make more, but you don't watch them. That's just truth.
Yeah.
You look at the high-end ones and you look at the fancy ones, those have way more views than the budget-friendly ones. And so the revenue that I'll make off of YouTube for that video might be $100, might be $200 if I'm lucky.
Wow.
So it doesn't even justify my cost to go there.
Right.
So from a business perspective, it doesn't make any sense. I can't pay my bills if I were to do that. But I'm more than happy to do it. It's not a pride thing. It's not, I only showcase these. And the big ones, like the $1 million ones, guess what? There's a brand paying me on top of that to make it make sense financially.
Gotcha.
Because they're featuring their best work. And they know that there might be just one of you that could afford this, and you might call them, and now they've got a new client. So it's advertising for them.
Gotcha.
So that's the short version of that. But I got a dedicated video on that.
Makes sense. Okay, very good. You know, one thing I've had to realize in all this is, specifically when we're talking about these really high-end systems and these rich people, is, you know, it's really easy to criticize the rich when I'm not rich.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm not rich, but I don't criticize them.
Yeah, and just with some of the comments I've seen who are criticizing them and so on.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And
people tend to be cynical on, you know, somewhere that they want to be that they're not.
yeah, you know, it's like, I would never blow that kind of money. And, you know, I've heard never judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes.
Yeah.
And after that, let it rip. Judge all you want to know. It reminds me of this professor years ago when I was involved with Campus Crusade for Christ. He would come to the meeting sometimes, and he says, you know, it can be really hard when God blesses you. I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I think he said he had prayed for God to bless him financially. Yeah. Well, he wrote a textbook, and it ended up becoming a bestseller. And so he started making a lot of money off of that.
Yeah.
And just reading between the lines, it sounded like maybe he had promised to give a certain percentage if he blessed him or something like that. And well, now all of a sudden that he was raking in the dough.
Yeah, yeah. Much more difficult.
Yeah, much more difficult now. Yeah. It's like, never mind.
So when I look at that, you know, it talks about how to whom much is given, much is required. If God can't trust you enough with the little things in life, why would he bless you with bigger things? You know, that's why so many people, when they hit the lotto, within the first year, they're bankrupt.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't figured out how to handle their finances now.
They just blew it all.
And so in my story, when I was 15 years old, I was making $7 a week. $5 to mow my grass, my parents' grass, and $2 to take out the trash twice a week. So I got $7.
Wow.
At the age of 15, I've tithed, you know, in the local church, that's 10% of your income. So I would tithe on that $7 every single week. And then when I got my first job at Ponderosa, we called it Ponderosa, at Ponderosa, I was making like $110 a week. That's a big difference in $7 a week. I continue to tithe on that. Now, of course, 30 whatever plus years later, 40 years later, I'm making well beyond Ponderosa, $100 a week, but I've continued to tithe. We continue to give. And so even in my life, if Obsessed Home Theater takes off and we're doing $10 million in sales a year or 20 or 30 or whatever that number is, still not going to change who I am.
Yep.
I'm still going to be the generous person that I am. I'm still going to support the families that we support. We're still going to give to the 2 ministries here locally. Now, it may not be those specifically. It may be somewhere we move to. But we're always going to find ways that we can help people. Because I truly believe that the blessings that God gives me isn't always meant for me. You know, whether that's something physical, it could be money, it could be my time, it could be my talent, my resources. And so again, it just comes down to your walk, your faith, and just saying, God, would you just use me, whatever I have. If I've got a little, the widow gave a mite. That was less than a cent. And God blessed her. But is God upset with David to give away tons of cattle as an offering? You know what I'm saying? Like, It's the same thing. It's always been about the heart. It's not about the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So with that, I thought it would be interesting to get your reaction to some of the ruder comments.
I read them every day. I read almost all of my comments.
Yeah, yeah, and I know for some people, they don't read the comments or scroll down far enough to see some of them. But in particular, a lot of the comments were on the shoot you did of the van cave.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful home
just
theater.
Amazing.
Most incredible home theater probably I've ever experienced.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
just done very well.
99% of the comments were, this is amazing. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Sure.
Wow, great job, and so on. But there were just a few
course.
that got all, judgmental and preachy, kind of like I said I can be at times. So I just wanted to get your fresh reaction,
Yeah, sure.
even though you
I
responded.
probably even
there.
responded to them.
Yeah, no, and you did. Yeah, you responded to, I think, just about all of these. Or he could use that money to help those less fortunate in this world.
100%. My challenge is, number one, how do we know what he does with his money? And in context, I've had conversation with him.
Robert, right?
Yeah, Robert started a foundation. His goal is to raise $80 million to provide fresh water to Africa. He's already had the ministry going. It's been going for, I think, a couple of years. He's already doing amazing work. He also gives his own money to this. It isn't just money that he raises. Yeah. So he's invested in this. He's doing what he believes God wants him to do in his part. And so, yes, could he give money to the poor? Or truthfully, the people that are saying that are going, well, couldn't he give some money to me?
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness, he's got so much money. Why couldn't he bless me so I could buy some subwoofers or whatever? Yeah. A lot of times that's where I think the heart of that comment is coming from. But the reality, again, I'm not the one to tell Robert how to spend his money or anybody else.
Sure.
And I don't know what he gives, the ways that he helps. I don't know if there's been a single mom that he has blessed with a brand new car.
Sure.
He could have done that easily.
He totally could.
But here's the thing. Typically, what I've found, not everybody, because I think there's rude poor people, there's rude rich people, but in general, some of the kindest, most generous people I know are wealthy people. And it's really hard to be a blessing to somebody else if you don't have any money.
Yep.
Think about that.
Sure.
If you're broke, and I learned this from Dave Ramsey, it's hard to give like no one else if you haven't put in the discipline to live like no one else. So you have to eat the beans and rice, the rice and beans, drive the old hoopty for a while, so that you can be a blessing to other people.
Very good. I love your content. And again, this is all about the Van Cave, multi-million-dollar home theater, which is, amazing. I love your content, but this is obscene. This just goes to show the level of disconnect between the ultra-rich and the rest of common people. Sorry, just can't see the justification of such excess.
Yeah. And you're right. You can't fathom how somebody that wealthy could spend that amount of money. It's all in context. Again, for somebody to spend $1,000 could be somebody else's $10. They're struggling to come up with an extra $10 because they live paycheck to paycheck and they're flat broke. There's nothing wrong with that. But the person that is able to write a check or hand out $1,000 cash and it doesn't change a thing in their life, that's a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. With that, I loved your comment about that, your last thing you said about that particular comment. You said, for me personally, I do not find what people spend their hard-earned money on offensive. What I find offensive is when someone lacks character, integrity, kindness, and humility.
Yeah.
My experience of Robert is he exhibits all of those good qualities.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He's a cool dude, man. I got a good chance to just spend with him. He was such a gracious host, so kind, and he was super humble, man.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, hey, don't you like what I got? He was like, my home's your home. How can I serve you? Can I get you anything? That kind of character, man. That was awesome.
That's nice.
It was a great experience.
Nice. In Matthew 7:1-2, particularly verse 2, don't judge, or, and the measure you use will be measured back to you.
Sure.
One guy even accused him of being a crook or something. Is how he got so rich. And I love it where he was saying, oh yeah, well, Mr. Beast drilled 100 wells, so what if this guy's drilling wells? And I love what you said to him. He says, oh, well, how many wells have you drilled? Thought so.
Yeah.
It's like.
Sometimes I can be cynical, or not cynical, but sarcastic.
Yeah,
like,
snarky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's just
but
my
you know
nature.
what, with the way the guy was being and so on, and that is such a pertinent question is, okay, you're criticizing this guy. Okay, well, what are you doing?
Right.
How much are you giving to
I'm
the
not
poor?
even doing what Robert's able
Oh
to
yeah,
do.
and me neither. And
But I don't have the resources that he has.
right. Well, and the widow's mite, like you talked about, where she basically put in 2 cents.
Yeah.
Jesus commended, and we think, well, so what, 2 cents? But Jesus commended her because she gave 100%.
Yeah. Everything she had.
Yeah, am I giving 100% of my money? No, I don't think so. And so Jesus looks at percentages, not absolute amounts. I mean, yes, of course, I'll take the.
He just looks at obedience. I don't even think it's a percentage thing, because sometimes he may challenge you to give it all. Other times he may challenge you to give a little. And again, to me, it just goes back to obedience. So as long as you're doing what you feel that you're supposed to do in life, and serving people, helping people, and if you're a Christian, just being obedient to God, then I think you're doing exactly what you need to be doing.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what doors of ministry this hobby has opened up for you.
Well, I shared that earlier. I mean, I've even told people I've had more opportunities probably now to minister to people and to love on people than I did in student ministry. I realize there's so many people that are hurting, so many people that are broken. They're going through a divorce. They've lost their job. They lost their mom, their dad. They've got health issues. And again, I just ask God to use me however he wants. And I just want to be salt. I want to be light. I want to be love. I want to be his hands and feet, of comfort during those difficult times. And so there's just, countless times, whether it's I had a guy reach out to me during the pandemic or after the pandemic, and he said, Michael, you have no idea how much your videos have impacted me. I was in such a dark time, a time of depression and really suicide, that your videos gave me hope. And I'm like, dude, I'm talking about speakers and subwoofers. How is that possible? But again, I think it goes more, it's more than just that. It's my life. It's my attitude. It's how I treat people. It's how I hopefully love you guys, and I'm kind in the comments and things like that.
Yeah, well, and that's what I've seen is one of the reasons I even dared to reach out to you is you just seem very approachable, very humble, and it's always such a positive attitude. It's a blessing. One of the principles I've seen is with all this stuff, whether it's home theaters or guns or cars or whatever, is that what might be okay for you, what you've been given permission by God to do, might not be okay for me.
Yeah.
Maybe he's calling you to spend a lot of money on this, but not me. Maybe that's not okay for me. And one of the verses with that is Romans 14:4. Who are you to judge the servant of another? To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand, for the Lord is able to make him stand.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I've asked myself when I've looked at spending money on this or that is, am I willing to spend as much blessing others as I'm willing to spend on myself? And that's a challenge for me. And when I have wrestled with some of those questions, I've looked at, well, how much have I been giving? It's like, oh, well, I gave a lot more than what this toy is going to cost. So okay, I don't feel so
now
bad
you're
after that.
justifying.
Now I'm justifying, yes.
So that's we look at things differently. It's one of those things where again, you just have to search your heart. You have to figure out what works for you, and your walk with God is going to look different than my walk with God.
Yeah.
And again, if you don't feel right doing it, don't do it by all means.
Right. Whatever is not from faith is sin.
But if God's given you the permission or whatever, or
The peace.
Yeah, the peace to do whatever that is, whatever that looks like. Buy the new home, buy a new car, or a nicer car or whatever. Go on a nice vacation. Heaven forbid somebody actually do that, and go to Hawaii or something and spend a lot of money there, or travel around the world. We can spend money on a lot of things, and again, money isn't the root of all evil.
No, it's
the
not.
love
It's
of
the
the money.
love of money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, money is amoral. Money is like a brick. You can put a brick in the hand of a construction worker, and he can build a hospital. He can build a nursing home. He can build a homeless shelter. You put a brick in a criminal's hand, and he can destroy something with it. He can break a window. He can hurt somebody with it.
Right.
And so the brick is just a brick, and that's the way I look at money. It's amoral. It's neither good nor bad. It's whose hand is the money in is what's going to determine, because my character, the money's going to take the perspective of my character and your character. Same thing with a thief. You put $10,000 in a thief's hand, well, he's probably not going to do something good with it, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, so the more money you have, the more it just amplifies whatever character traits you have, whether it's good or bad.
That is correct. So if you're naturally a generous person and you become wealthy, you're going to be extremely generous.
All the more generous.
If you're a selfish individual and you get a lot of money, guess what? You're still going to be greedy.
And
you're still going to be selfish.
Worse.
Yeah. So again, that's a character issue, and that's why I shared earlier. That's what I'm more concerned about.
Yeah. Some of the other principles I've looked at with this whole thing is, before I go buy whatever, are there other priorities I need to take care of first? I've looked at buying a new TV, but it's like, it'd really be good if I paid off my Jeep first. It'd really be good to go on a vacation with my wife first before I do that.
Yeah.
So and like you said earlier, I would hope one is not going into debt to get a toy.
Yeah, I definitely don't recommend that, and people have different opinions on debt. And I'm not here to judge you if you got credit card debt or house debt or car debt or whatever. That's your money, your life.
Yeah.
You do you, boo-boo, is what I think.
Yeah. Well, debt for a business investment purpose, that's one thing, but just for a depreciating something, why?
But even that, I mean, there's even, and Dave Ramsey, again, going back to his philosophy, he doesn't do debt for anything.
Right.
If we can't raise the capital, if we can't save the money and buy the building or do the upgrade, then we just don't do it yet. And so that's one business philosophy. Some people say you have to invest money or sometimes take out loans to make money, and that's just another philosophy. Anytime you add debt, you just add risk because we're uncertain of what could happen. I could lose my job, I could get unhealthy, a lot of things could happen, and the more debt you have, the more difficult that is. And that's why we made a commitment many, many years ago, probably 25 years ago. We're tired of being broke. And so I started a business building websites from home, making money doing that. We began to take that extra money, and we didn't go on vacations for years. And we paid off debt. It took us 6 years to pay off $50,000 in consumer debt.
Wow.
And we didn't own a home. We had we had 2 cars. We had some student loan debt. We had a little bit of credit card debt. And that was a horrible period. And I just don't ever want to go back to that. So that's why we don't have debt. So if we can't save up for it, if we can't pay cash for it, we just don't do it. The home is the only exception to that, because I don't have a couple $100,000 to pay cash for a house.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Wrap up with a couple of things. One is from Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might.
Yeah. And that's probably, so I'm a perfectionist even when I edit videos, and I'll spend hours sometimes an hour or 2 hours doing the first 20 seconds, 30 seconds of the video, just tweaking it and doing this and doing that. And it's like, is that really necessary? Probably not, but I want to produce my best. I want to give my best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Earlier I was filming a video and I was inside this. So normally my lights are even different than here because it's normally just me. And we even had to figure this out, what would look decent. I'm not good at lighting, but I was filming from a different position. And the very first one I filmed it, went in there and I was like, oh my gosh, it looks terrible. I could have just sent it, man, just shoot it. But that's not me. I want to give it my best.
Yeah, same for me too. I can't stand that. It will drive me nuts if I put out something like that.
But on the flip side, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Because you can analyze something and you can pursue something and never do something because you're always one more thing, one more tweak, one more adjustment, and then you never get to enjoy it or you never get to send it. And
Steve Jobs said, good artists ship.
Yeah, you got to.
And then I love this saying from Howard Thurman. Don't ask what the world needs. ask what makes you come alive and go do it.
Yeah.
Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and this is kind of a good segue into it. When I was a youth pastor, I was at a convention, and it was called the Youth Pastor Summit. They bring all the youth pastors together at Rock the Universe, give us a day at the park. They pay for everything. It's awesome. And they're just loving on us, giving us tools, resources, and pastors come in and preach to you and teach you and encourage you, because we're living in the trenches kind of thing. And he asked the question, he said, what keeps you up at night? Like, what consumes your thoughts? And I took a deep look inside of myself and had to come to the realization it was no longer youth ministry. And it scared me. I'm thinking, man, what is going on? Man, I must be evil or something, because I'm not enjoying lock-ins all night with 300 teenagers. And I don't enjoy the bus ride that's, 21 hours from summer camp and got middle schoolers screaming all the way home. I don't enjoy that anymore. What's wrong with me,
Yeah.
And the answer was technology. It was speakers and that kind of stuff. That's like what I thought about constantly. And again, I truly believe that was something that God placed in my life and in my heart. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this. This is something I made up. I didn't go, oh, one day I just think it was placed in my life for a reason. And that reason is for me to be in relationship with the people that he wants me to be in relationship, to love on them, to encourage them, to be a blessing to them, to offer hope, those kind of things. So to me, that's what this thing's all about. It's way bigger than speakers and subwoofers and theater seats and projectors.
I love it. Well, man, I'm ready to go take out a mortgage on my apartment. I don't think the landlord will mind.
Yeah, no.
No,
Randy, this has been fun. Definitely been different. I know this is going to be way different for you guys, but I'm an open book. And when you asked, could you interview me? Could you pick my brain, some things that you were struggling with? Why not?
Why not? Well, I certainly appreciate the time. You've been more than gracious and generous hosting
Thanks,
me
man.
here, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, brother. Cool deal, guys. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know what to say, but thanks, man. It's been fun.
you.
It's weird being on the other side of the interview.
Yeah.
That's what I got to say.
I figured this would be fun, better than just reading questions off an email or something.
Yeah, for sure, man. Hope you guys have an incredible week. God bless. We'll catch you in the next video.